January 14th, 2026, 0324 p.m. Strait of Hormuz, 54 nautical miles northeast of Musandam. The sea is glass flat, the air tastes of salt in diesel exhaust, and the afternoon sun turns the water into hammered copper around a U.S. Navy formation moving at 18 knots. At the center of that formation is USS Jack H. Lucas, DDG 125, a Flight III Arleigh Burke-class destroyer carrying a hull value of roughly $2.5 billion, built around the AN Speewee 6 V1 radar and the Aegis Baseline 10 combat system. It is, in blunt terms, an air and missile defense knife blade, one designed to keep the world's most trafficked energy corridor open. Because the Strait of Hormuz is not just geography, it is economics made vulnerable. Every day, tankers and container ships funnel through a maritime choke point where a single incident can spike insurance rates, reroute shipping, and throw billions of dollars of trade into delay. The mission is simple to state and brutal to execute. Keep the lanes open, deter interference, and respond instantly if deterrence fails. The formation's calm is disciplined. Helicopter rotors are still. The destroyer's deck crews are inside, monitoring consoles and hydraulic lines. Far above, an airborne early warning orbit quietly paints the sky for threats. And then the silence is shattered. At 0326 p.m., the tactical action officer on Lucas receives a compressed intelligence flash routed through Fifth Fleet channels. Chinese naval drills have begun in a different theater, far from Hormuz, but loud enough to ripple through regional calculations. The message is not about shells splashing into the sea. It is about signaling, about adversaries reading opportunity and distraction. 2 minutes later at 0328 p.m., Lucas's AN Speewee 6 array returns a contact anomaly, a low intermittent radar cross-section, skimming in and out of clutter at 64 nautical miles, bearing 318. It is not a commercial airliner. It is not squawking. It is moving fast enough to be either a high-speed drone or a sea-skimming cruise missile profile in its initial phase. On the surface picture, another anomaly forms. At 0329 p.m., two IRGCN fast inshore attack craft, small hulls, hard wakes, and aggressive geometry, break from the Iranian coastline and begin running parallel to the shipping lane. Their speed is high, their intentions unreadable, and their spacing is tactical. Not one boat, but a pair, forcing the U.S. to consider the classic swarm problem. Lucas is built for this, but being built for it does not make it easy. The ship's combat system can track far beyond the horizon, and Standard Missile 6 interceptors can sprint to targets at roughly Mach 3.5, with published ranges on the order of 130 nautical miles, sometimes described higher depending on profile and mission. Each shot costs millions. In FY 2024 pricing, an SM-6 is listed at $9,594,400. The question is not whether Lucas can shoot. The question is what is real, what is bait, and what is about to arrive hidden inside the noise. At 0331 p.m., the first distress call hits the net. A commercial tanker reports unmanned aerial vehicle overhead, no lights, and requests immediate coalition assistance. The contact is close enough to matter, close enough that if it turns into an explosive drone strike, the economic consequences will echo outside the Gulf. At 0332 p.m., Lucas's bridge and CIC run the same calculation every ship in these waters knows by heart. Distance, closure rate, engagement zones, and rules of engagement. The sea remains calm, but the tactical picture is now erupting into something else, and the destroyer's captain realizes the next 42 minutes will decide whether this is another day of posturing or a modern naval ambush. Antagonist forces in the Gulf do not announce themselves with flags. They announce themselves with profiles and signatures. IRGCN fast attack craft with rockets and heavy machine guns, shore-based anti-ship cruise missile batteries like the Nor family, and one-way attack drones that can skim low, blend with clutter, and force expensive intercepts. The Nor is assessed in open sources at subsonic cruise speed around Mach 0.18 to 0.9, with sea-skimming profiles intended to compress reaction time. At 0333 p.m., the watch floor hardens. Lucas goes to a higher readiness posture. Aegis baseline 10 starts fusing tracks at higher confidence thresholds. Electronic warfare operators begin scanning for emissions that don't belong. The ship's captain is decisive, and the language in CIC becomes clipped. Hold fire. Track everything. If it turns hot, we end it fast. At 03:34 p.m. in Bahrain, 5th Fleet's Operations Center receives the same composite picture. Surface harassment building on the Iranian side, an airborne anomaly offshore, and a global political signal that could be interpreted as a permission slip. The operational decision is made quickly. Reinforce the corridor, protect the merchant vessel, and deny the enemy the ability to synchronize threats from air and sea. By 03:36 p.m., additional coalition sensors are cued toward the tanker's reported position. The U.S. air picture is widened. The question is no longer whether something is happening. The question is how many layers it has. At 03:38 p.m., the airborne anomaly resolves into two separate tracks. One is low and steady, drone-like, prop-driven, slow enough to loiter, fast enough to close. The other is higher, faster, and intermittent, as if it is being guided in short bursts. And then, at 03:40 p.m., the surface threat multiplies. 4 more fast craft appear on radar, 22 nautical miles from the shipping lane, moving in a loose wedge. Their hulls are cheap. Their intent is expensive. Force a U.S. ship to choose between protecting itself, protecting commerce, and avoiding escalation, all at once. This is exactly how modern maritime coercion works. At 03:42 p.m., the president is briefed in Washington via secure channel. The words are blunt. Sir, they're trying to stage a two-axis problem, surface swarm plus airborne strike potential. The president's answer is immediate. Protect the ships, keep the lane open. You have the authority to neutralize imminent threats. At 03:44 p.m., the strike group commander's guidance is even sharper. Commander Lucas, you are the shield. Do not let them touch the merchant traffic. Within 6 minutes, the destroyer's posture changes from surveillance to imminent engagement. At 03:46 p.m., Lucas transmits bridge-to-bridge warnings. The fast craft ignores them. Their wakes sharpen. Their spacing tightens. By 03:48 p.m., the airborne drone track is 41 nautical miles out, descending, reducing its signature. And at 03:49 p.m., the first unmistakable sign arrives. A radar-emitting spike from the Iranian coast. Fire control behavior that suggests a shore battery is queuing. This is no longer harassment. This is a setup. At 03:50 p.m., Lucas's CIC calls it plainly. Possible launch indications. The captain's response is controlled. Weapons tight, engage if declared hostile. Prepare SM-6, ESSM, and close in. If the threat breaks into a coordinated salvo, drones plus sea skimmers plus fast craft, reaction time will be measured in seconds. And even a $2.5 billion destroyer can be overwhelmed if the timing is perfect. But could a single Flight III destroyer, even with SPY-6 and Aegis baseline 10, overcome a deliberately layered attack in the world's most dangerous shipping lane? The question remained, would the U.S. fire first to prevent catastrophe, or wait until the catastrophe had already begun? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if you were the commanding officer with merchant lives, international trade, and escalation risk all balanced on a single radar screen? At 03:52 p.m., the first launch happens. The warning tones do not scream yet. They chirp, an initial alert that becomes a sustained howl as SPY-6 confirms what every operator fears. A sea-skimming cruise missile profile rising briefly above the horizon line, then dropping down into the clutter to hide. Range 58 nautical miles. Speed subsonic, but fast enough to turn distance into panic. At 03:53 p.m., a second launch signature appears. Different track, different bearing, converging. Two separate threats are now collapsing toward the same engagement zone. This is the moment the title promises. 42 minutes after the first anomaly, the trap tightens, and the U.S. has to break it. At 03:54 p.m., Lucas orders weapons free against confirmed inbound missiles. The Mk-41 vertical launching system becomes a furnace mouth. At 3:54 p.m., two RIM-174 Standard Missile 6 interceptors leap upward, their boosters kicking the ship in the chest with vibration, then pitching into a calculated arc. They accelerate through transonic and into supersonic sprint, hunting not with hope, but with terminal guidance logic. Each interceptor is a decision measured in dollars and seconds, roughly $9.57 million per shot against a threat that might cost a fraction of that. At 3:55 p.m., the missiles descend toward the sea-skimmers' predicted intercept points. Radar screens light up with intersecting vectors. The fire control solution tightens. At 3:56 p.m., the first intercept occurs. The missile hits. The proximity fuse detonates. The sea-skimmer's body disintegrates into metallic spray and burning fragments that skip across the water like sparks on oil. But the second inbound is still alive, and now the other half of the trap closes. At 3:47 p.m., the drone track, previously low and uncertain, turns directly toward the merchant vessel. Its altitude drops further. Its approach path aligns with the tanker's starboard quarter. Lucas cannot allow impact. At 3:58 p.m., an evolved Sea Sparrow missile profile is selected, and RIM-162, a medium-range interceptor that can run at roughly Mach 4 and reach about 27 nautical miles. A cheaper shot than SM-6, but still a significant expenditure at roughly $1,795 million in FY 2021 average cost figures. At 3:59 p.m., the ESSM launches from a quad-pack cell, a compact spear punching into the sky. At 4:00 p.m., the drone is hit. It breaks apart, not in a cinematic fireball, but in a violent shudder and collapse. Wings shearing, fragments dropping into the sea in a widening circle. The merchant vessel is safe for the moment, but the surface swarm is still coming. At 04:01 p.m., the IRGCN fastcraft pushes closer, now 9 nautical miles from the shipping lane. Their formation changes again. 2 boats racing ahead, the rest spreading wide to complicate targeting. At 04:02 p.m., one craft fires a burst, tracer arcs across the water, not aimed to hit the destroyer's hull, but to force a reaction. At 04:03 p.m., Lucas answers with warning shots and aggressive maneuvering, maintaining protective geometry between the swarm and merchant traffic. Then at 04:04 p.m., the second cruise missile, thought to be the last, reappears. It survived the mid-course chaos. It is now inside 18 nautical miles. At 04:05 p.m., Lucas's layered defense compresses into pure reaction. The ship's close-in systems come alive. The failing CIWS, a 20mm radar-guided Gatling gun capable of firing up to 4,500 rounds per minute, spins into engagement posture. At 04:06 p.m., the missile crosses the final threshold. At 04:06 p.m., warning tones scream. At 04:06 p.m., the phalanx opens fire. A line of incandescent tracers lashes out across the surface of the sea. The air fills with shredded vapor trails and hot brass cycling through the weapon's feed system. At 04:07 p.m., the incoming missile is hit at close range. Its nose yaws. It loses stability. It detonates low, close enough to rattle the destroyer with concussion, far enough to avoid a direct strike. But shock waves still carry consequences. At 04:08 p.m., Lucas reports internal system impacts from the near blast. Localized heat spikes on exposed topside sensors, temporary signal noise, and a hydraulic pressure fluctuation in one of the ship's topside systems, dropping to 82% nominal for 11 seconds before automatic compensation stabilizes it. It is not catastrophic. It is a reminder. Even when you win, the margin can be measured in meters. At 04:09 p.m., the captain does not pause. Neutralize the swarm. Protect the lane. End it. At 04:10 p.m., the ship's chain of command authorizes decisive action against the fast craft, now demonstrating hostile intent. A 5-inch gun solution is plotted, the Mk-45 gun mount, capable of firing 16 to 20 rounds per minute, with an effective range around 13 nautical miles with conventional ammunition and up to roughly 20 nautical miles in Mod 4 discussions, elevates and locks. At 04:11 p.m., the first round lands short, a deliberate ranging shot. At 04:12 p.m., the second round hits. The lead fastcraft erupts into splintered hull panels and flame. Debris rains into the sea. The wake collapses into a smear of oil and foam. At 04:13 p.m., a second craft tries to break away at maximum throttle. It doesn't matter. The gun fires again. The third hit breaks its stern. The vessel spins, dead in the water. At 04:14 p.m., the remaining boats scatter, suddenly no longer brave, no longer confident. This is the psychological turn that always arrives when coercion meets certainty. At 04:15 p.m., Fifth Fleet broadcasts an unambiguous warning to Iranian command channels. Continued interference will be met with immediate, overwhelming force. The two threats that began this incident, the layered airborne strike and the coordinated surface harassment, have now collapsed into failure. The drone is gone. The missiles are destroyed. The swarm is broken. But the U.S. does not end the sequence with anger. It ends with arithmetic. At 04:16 p.m., combat assessment begins. 2 cruise missiles were destroyed. 1 drone was destroyed. 2 hostile fast craft were destroyed. At least 1 disabled and abandoned. No U.S. fatalities. No merchant fatalities. 1 U.S. warship with minor topside and system strain from a near blast. Fully mission capable. At 04:17 p.m., the cost-benefit equation is calculated on the fly. The U.S. expended 2 SM-6 interceptors at approximately $957 million each, about $15 million. 1 ESSM interceptor at roughly $1.795 million, FY 2021 average, about $1.8 million. Several bursts of CIWS ammunition in multiple 5-inch rounds, costly but trivial compared to missiles. Total U.S. expenditure in major interceptors, roughly $21 million. And the enemy? The fast craft is comparatively cheap, but the strategic loss is not the hulls. The loss is the failed attempt to impose risk on the strait, and the exposure of tactics that U.S. sensors and doctrine can now counter in real time. At 04:18 p.m., a U.S. authority figure delivers the message that matters. The United States will defend freedom of navigation. Attempts to threaten commercial shipping will fail. The contrast is absolute. Enemy confidence at 3:40 p.m. Enemy annihilation by 04:20 p.m. At 04:19 p.m., the merchant tanker resumes normal speed. Coalition escorts widen their screen. The shipping lane remains open. And across the region, every operations center that watches these waters absorbs the same lesson. Modern naval warfare is not about who shouts the loudest. It is about who can see first, decide first, and shoot with certainty. In the aftermath, media networks report the incident within hours, framing it as another flashpoint in a corridor that cannot afford instability. Analysts focus on the layered nature of the threat, the mix of cheap drones, subsonic sea skimmers, and swarm craft designed to compress decision-making into seconds. Strategically, the message is larger than a single engagement. It reinforces a regional reality. The U.S. Navy's integrated air and missile defense, built around systems like SPY-6 and Aegis Baseline 10, turns the sea itself into a defended battle space. And it underscores a modern paradox. The cheapest weapons in the world, one-way drones and fast boats, can force the most expensive navies to spend millions in seconds. But technology, training, and command discipline decide whether that pressure becomes a catastrophe or simply becomes another failed attempt recorded in the logs. Later, a senior officer summarizes the lesson in a single line. Deterrence is not a slogan, it is a system, tested in minutes. And on January 14, 2026, in the Strait of Hormuz, that system held. If you value this kind of analysis and want to keep uncovering the real lessons behind today's conflicts, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue bringing you the untold stories of modern warfare.